I never said that. I can't believe you would accuse me of that. That's crazy. So this guy doesn't have much to say, but we can learn a lot from him or her. The idea of drawing the head can be extremely intimidating. So I'm excited to share with you guys just one modality, one way of doing it. And we're going to explore many different ways of doing it and many different angles. But today we'll be doing the side, and we'll be walking through the basic principles and ideas that we cover here at our school. Okay, so part of this series, in order for us to really make this valuable to you guys, is I wanted to have a second opinion and somebody who themselves has been a student here and is now actually our studio manager and editor for all of our videos. Her name is Lani. Say hi.
Hi.
She's great, and it's great to have somebody give that second opinion, ask the right questions. Hopefully this format works for you guys. And without further ado, let's get it started.
So tell us what you're doing here.
Okay, so the first thing that I always start off with is the shape of the skull, the cranial mass, which is represented clearly as a ball. So the idea is to get a nice clean circular form. Because I'm actually looking at the side of the head, it's going to be something between an egg and a ball. So I also will outline what I'm about to draw, just to get a feel for whether or not I'm reading it correctly. And that doesn't matter whether I'm working from life or from a photograph. I'm going to kind of imitate the line and kind of mask what I'm about to do before I actually put it down. My method is a combination of Loomis, Sargent, and Riley. So I employ a number of different methods. You may also be wondering why I'm drawing so lightly. So the idea behind drawing as lightly as I am is because I don't really know exactly where everything fits. I may be able to visualize it, but until I actually put it down, I'm not sure if it's in the right spot. So I need to keep my lines really, really light and very, very erasable in the beginning. And then once I get a better feel for the position and placement, then I'll get into a much richer drawing.
Are there any standard guidelines you would use when drawing a portrait like this?
Start with the biggest shapes, that's for sure. That's number one. And then number two is always work from your largest planes into your smaller planes. I don't actually look at the face, I look at the planes. I look at the large pieces and think of them as chiseling it out of a piece of wood or carving it out of clay. And in doing that, I get a much stronger drawing. What I'm doing now is I'm looking carefully to simplify everything. I want to keep my shapes as simple and geometric as possible. And I'm only using one pencil. In the beginning stages of this whole thing, you'll notice that I'm using that drafting pencil that we talked about earlier. And the idea of using a drafting pencil is to keep things really light and very erasable.
Generally, when will you start going in with darker lines? Just once you have everything set where you like it?
Yes. So I like the idea of putting down I think of it in three stages. Stage one is your macro planes, your big planes, then your mid planes, then your smaller micro planes, and then the detail. So everything that's macro, that's big, the large shapes, things like eye sockets, the large size of the nose, the large space of the nose, not the details inside. Placement of the lips, not necessarily the detail inside. The ear, the cheekbone, the hair, all of those things that you're currently watching me draw. All of that for me needs to be done first and needs to be looked at from a global scale. I'm not trying to mimic anything, I'm trying to interpret. I mean, I think a lot of people, they draw the head backwards. That's the major mistake that almost everybody makes, is that they start with the detail and then try to build the structure around it. And it's really, in this phase, all about proportion, all about scale, all about size.
When you're looking at more the features of the face, is there a specific one you like to start with to kind of anchor in those proportions?
I usually start with the brow and then move down into the nose and then into the mouth. But for me, I want to make sure that I'm slowly building everything congruently and at the same time. The reason is because if I focus or hyper focus on one area and build out a part too early, what will end up happening is that I then get stuck with that and I'm not able to move it. And if that's in the wrong place, then my whole drawing is, I have to start over. The other thing I want to mention is this phase is the longest phase by far. It's like 60% of the video, I think. And so this really light, simple drawing, I'm going to work on for as long as I can and stay in this phase, which is really uncomfortable, by the way. I don't find this part super pleasant. I love detail. I'm an artist. I want to get into the details. But I learned over time to just slow down and get that structure just right. So you can see I'm literally looking for little triangles. And this is a method that I really like to do, is to use the negative space, the outside shapes, to create the positive space.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed you're going in with more straight lines rather than curves.
That's a great point. I'm really glad you brought that up. So the idea of having straight lines over curved lines is that humans really suck at drawing curved lines. They're not good at mimicking a curved line. What I like about a straight line is that that's something that you can easily measure. You can always curve it off later. But in the beginning, ideally, I like to start with more straight lines than I do curved lines. And I find that my drawing is much more structurally sound.
So are there any major mistakes that you feel people make a lot when starting to draw?
In regards to drawing the head, yes. They tend to overdraw the size of the eye. They tend to place it too high. Sometimes they overdraw the nose and the mouth. And that's because they're just looking way too hard at the details and kind of the mid and micro planes over the macro. You really want to think of it as a whole right now. I'm working a head. I have no interest in the face right now. And I say that while I'm, adjusting parts of the nose and mouth and all that. But I'm only doing that to just get a better understanding of this head overall. I know that all of my lines as I'm putting them down are temporary lines. They're tentative. They'll become more permanent as I move forward and gain a little more confidence, because it's the context that tells you everything. The other major mistake that I've seen is that sometimes if somebody has a long nose, they add half an inch extra to the nose, which is completely unnecessary and way too over the top. If somebody has a long nose, it's a little longer by maybe half a centimeter or a full centimeter. It's really a small amount. The face is about subtlety. I'm almost certain if aliens ever came to visit us, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference between us. We as humans have learned to pick up on very subtle differences in the face, which is exactly why drawing and painting a head is so hard. It's because humans can pick up that something is wrong. They may not be able to tell you because they're not trained as artists, but they can look at a face and say, wait a second, something's wrong here. The subtlety of the face is what makes it so challenging. So focusing on, again, that big picture is going to really help resolve those issues.
Are there any tips or tricks you would say to getting the proportions of each section of the face correct?
Measure. Measure over and over and over again. What I haven't yet discussed is the rule of thirds, but if you go back early on in this video and look, I measured multiple times to make sure that the image that I'm looking at really does break down into thirds, meaning that it goes from the top of the forehead down to the brow, brow to the nose, and nose to the chin. So I measure and then remeasure and then measure again. The other thing that you'll notice I do is a lot of linear extension. I draw the line across the entire face. So instead of just drawing a line where I think it is, I actually connect it to one or two points. And by doing that, I know now that that's in the right place.
So I see for the eye, instead of drawing the eye shape as it is, you've done a triangle.
Yeah. So that goes right back to the idea of simplifying. I need to put in the eye socket before I ever put in the eye. And from what I can tell, I'm really basically following the shadow. It's really just the triangle shape. Simplify, 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 simplify. It's if you don't have the simple shape right underneath, the more complicated shape on top just won't fit. So John Singer Sargent famously would scrape an eye, put it back in, scrape an eye, put it back in, and then scrape the face. And people would ask him, why would you do that? And his answer was, if I'm having that much trouble with the eye, there must be something wrong with the overall structure of the face. So it's really rough. I think people love the idea of portrait drawing, but when they find out how much work is involved, they tend to lose their excitement. Drawing the face is an extremely difficult pursuit, but I think it's actually the best thing to do for artists. That and drawing figures forces you to really develop strong observational skills, which is really the name of the game.
When working on a piece like this, when do you know to start with some of that subtle shading?
You want to do it early. I'm still in my early drafting phase. And the reason why I get into some of that early shading is not because I'm focusing on value, but instead I'm just trying to see my shapes better by separating light from dark. So that simple separation of this is where there's light, this is where there's shadow, will really help you better understand your form. And if you think about it, the only reason why something is in shadow versus light is because there's a change in the plane. So I'm still continuing to do plane work simply by shading in a certain area.
Since the head is known to be one of the hardest things to draw and be good at, how many do you think you have to do before you really get the hang of it?
Somewhere between, I would say, 200 to 300 heads. And the reason why I say that is because if somebody like John Singer Sargent, who is considered to be one of the greatest portrait artists who ever lived, had to scrape off, hit the face on a painting or start over on a drawing 2 to 3 times, and in some cases up to 5, then it means that there's no way of getting it perfect the first time, nor is there any way of mastering this skill without putting in tremendous amount of effort. There's so much to process. Getting the ear right, getting the eye right, getting the nostrils right, getting the texture of hair right. You know, it's endless. So the more heads you draw, the better. I would argue that shading a head isn't going to give you the benefits that learning how to structure it does. That's why I stay so focused on this. You'll notice that like 50% of this video is just me structuring everything. So my only reason for shading anything is just so that I can better understand the structure. And what you'll notice is I'm making long lines and long relationships going across. So really staying focused on that. And again, my only reason for blocking that out right now is because I need to be able to see the shape. That's it.
Okay, we're upside down now.
Yes, we are. We are upside down. The reason for this is because there are very few advantages of working from a photograph, and I mean very few. This is one of them. Photographs tend to distort things, they tend to over-darken shadows, they tend to hyper-exaggerate lights, they hyper-sharpen everything. It's hard to tell what belongs in back, what is in front, so it flattens stuff. There's all kinds of issues in regards to working from a photograph. Whenever possible, I advise working from life. However, this is the one advantage, is that you get to turn it upside down. And the benefit of turning it upside down is that it forces you to see things as abstract shapes. And like I mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, all painting, drawing, and even sculpture is just basically shape management. So if you're able to see it as abstract shapes and manage your shapes well, then you're going to have a strong drawing. So I highly recommend at some point in your process, if you're working from a photograph, turn both the reference and the surface that you're working on upside down. It's really helpful.
I also noticed that you've now switched pencils.
Yes, I switch pencils because at this point I am ready to add value. So my focus is no longer on getting the right structural shape as it is getting the right values. And those values are in and of themselves shapes. We often refer to it as just simply shading, but shading is too vague a word. So it's about the right value of each of those shapes. And so this pencil that I'm using is the layout pencil, and it's much darker. So getting in this tone is going to help to really create some dramatic effect and some contrast. And it's not until I actually whip out the next pencil, which is significantly darker, that you're really going to see the darkest of darks. But in general, I like to start with a light pencil, then move into a medium, and then finally a dark. So what you don't see me do in this video is step back. But in between takes, I'm literally stepping back to see, does this look right at a distance? Because what it looks like up front versus what it looks like at a distance are two totally different things. So Lani, I've made you turn your stuff upside down in class. How did you find that helpful?
I did find it helpful. I hated it. I think it's very weird to look at something upside down. You know what you're doing, but it's just not in the way you'd want it. And that just really does force you to look at shapes, values, rather than, oh, I'm drawing a head, I'm drawing this. Because when you're upside down, it's like, well, I know that's what I'm drawing, but you're just not seeing it the same way. So it is definitely helpful. Not my favorite thing, not gonna lie, but it does really help with the overall structure of a piece.
I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things that I have gotten so used to how uncomfortable it is upside down that I don't even think about it. But it's going to feel uncomfortable. And the sooner you get comfortable with that uncomfortability, the better. I'd also say that one of the things that's really uncomfortable for professional artists is putting the details in last. Because I want to put those details in immediately, like from day one.
Oh, same.
Right?
Yep.
Yep. All of us do. I think no matter where you are in your art career, whether you're a beginner or super advanced, details are very addictive. They give you the dopamine hit. They're so much fun to put in. They are so satisfying, but we have to learn to be disciplined to put them at the end.
Okay, so what's happening now?
Well, at this point, I've got my lights and my mediums, and I'm pretty much ready for my darks. And since I'm about to switch over to my darks, I would want to turn it right side up.
Okay, tell me a little bit more about the pencil that you're holding right now.
Well, if you look carefully, it's a green pencil. It's a wider gauge, and it's known as the 9XXB. It's the Kimberly pencil, which we talked about in the materials video. So if you haven't looked at that materials video, I highly recommend you do so. And the rest of that part of the pencil that I'm actually holding is the extender. So I love pencil extenders because they really help me get a full grip so that my whole hand can hold the pencil and I can have the greatest amount of control. But this pencil is so dark that I often refer to it as the stick of death, because once it goes down, it's not coming off.
For this piece, you're keeping the hair very simple. Is this on purpose?
Hair is a lot of work, and while it is beautiful, my focus here is just trying to get the face right. So on a sketch like this, I'm just going to indicate enough information to convince you that there's hair on the head, but to get into any more detail is going to turn into a very elaborate drawing. So the actual time that it took me to draw this whole thing out is about 90 minutes, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But if I really wanted to get the hair done right, it would have been a 3-hour drawing. If you understand the general technique of drawing hair, which we'll do a separate video of, then it's not difficult. It's just really staying focused on grouping your values, your darks, your mediums, and your lights, and making it clear that there are 1 or 2 stray hairs maybe, but for the most part, hair is rather smooth.
So it's really just picking your details then.
That's right. I think a great way to think about it is imagine every detail costs you 25 bucks and you've got, I don't know, $500. So you don't have a lot of options in terms of where you're going to put your details. I like that idea because by being stingy with details, you're only focused on the most important. Because as you know, we all get lost in the sauce and get caught up with way too many unnecessary details.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So is this pretty much done for you?
As a sketch, absolutely. As a drawing, no. I would spend a lot of time refining this, but that's only to satisfy my own desire as an artist to have a finished piece. In terms of what I can learn from this, I don't think there's much benefit in adding the additional shading. This was honestly just one approach towards drawing the head using graphite. You can use charcoal, you can use a million other materials, pastels, oils, watercolor, whatever it is, and you can use 100 different other methods in doing all of this. But the core idea is to start from your biggest shapes and move into your smaller shapes, which is why I recommend staying focused on those large planes, your macro planes, your mid planes, and then finally your micro planes. So hopefully this made sense in both in terms of approach and in terms of the conceptual idea behind all of this. Drawing the head is hard, it's really hard. So be patient with yourself. And if you have any questions regarding how I did all of this, leave them in the comments and I'll do my very best to answer a few of them. Thank you guys, over and out. And that's the way the cookie crumbles. I won't say bye. I'll see you guys next time.